So I was just going to say the same thing, that there are two regulatory things, not just one. The second one, which is more interesting, is on advertising. That every advertising is going through.
Yes.
So the my question is, and I'm seeing that in some boards, that while there are three compulsory committees that you all sit on, and you may be part of those subcommittees, the latest trend that we see, and I just wanted to sort of check with you, and that's what answers the question on COPCOM coming on the board, is the stakeholder committee that certain companies have, and the other committee is the reputation committee. And that risk comes largely from large project size companies which are in that stage of growing, because growth is directly proportional to risk. And therefore, in those committees, the Reputation Management Committee, it's always the communication chief who reports. And I know of two such companies. My question to you is, rather than feeling comfortable with these two regulations coming in, what are you doing as board members at the Risk Management Committee to tell them to form these committees quickly? Because you're getting so many complaints from customers, you should have had a stakeholder committee by now. So, not to put you in the hot seat. The question is to the directors who sit on the board. So how soon do you sort of raise the alarm now with the regulations coming in? Because we are seeing what is happening to banks, what is happening to many reputed organizations. And when do you take that call? Because I think it's more about pre-planning at the board level than any one of us wanting to be on the board or committees.
So just the role of the stakeholder committee is a lot about managing the shareholder relationship. The biggest, the most sort of common activity there is ensuring that the shares are transferred or the demat happens, or there is SEBI guidelines on the number of days within which the company has to act, and so there's very little to do about so the stakeholder definition here is really about the shareholder. Yes. and not about the customer, and while it may be there, but to a large extent this is where the committee focuses on. So I haven't yet heard of the Reputation Management Committee, but there is a Risk Committee which kind of includes this activity, and that's where it currently gets discussed.
So, sorry, just to add to that, a great question, Shalini. I think, in the order of hierarchy, in a kind of loose manner of putting it, for most companies it's the Audit Committee, then comes in a sense the NRC, which does, all the people, and then there's the Risk Committee. There are companies that have a CSR committee, they have a they have a stakeholder. And like Siraj pointed out, often stakeholders nothing but checking on that. I think and in a sense it also addresses the question Deepa had, I think where COPCOM folks can come in is to ensure that you get a good position in the management dashboard. What happens never failingly for most companies is that the CEO presents a quarterly management dashboard, right? The obvious lead metrics are revenue, profitability, PAT, PBT, etc., etc. But then they always go to a second level which talks about employee churn, attrition. Now there's the whole issue of sentiment analysis that can start with brand recall and top of mind, but always goes about what are people saying about the company, right? There's normally a figure, and that is a good entry point. If you ensure that as senior people, you get a look at the management dashboard, why aren't we talking about sentiment analysis? Another never failing hook to get management and board attention is to give a little bit of a competitive perspective. I know board members will jump when they hear, oh my God, so our competition got 70% of the positive sentiment and we got 10%. Hey, we got a problem, right? So until you provoke, and I'm using a kind of negative word, but until you're able to make sure there's an element of sentiment analysis, which is a function of comms in general, it won't precipitate. So maybe that's the part of push that comms professionals should do. But that was a great question, Shal.
So I'll just finish this. 2 out of 3 boards that I'm part of, actually, I've seen something where boards, and as board members, we insist that a broader cross-section of people who are maybe CXOs as well as second rung are brought into the meeting. Because as board members, that gives us comfort in terms of the bench also, by the way. So 2 out of 3, not all of them. So I think that's one way. The other thing, I have a very honest suggestion, is that how many of you even asked your CEO to be part of any of these committees? Keep asking, because I feel that some of you are probably waiting to be invited. What's the worst that can happen? They can say no to you. Abhi nahi, just wait, we wait. But the fact that you have shown interest, that can I be part of the ESG committee to begin with, or if there is a CSR committee, or even this stakeholder committee, the fact that you're putting yourself out there and you want to, and give reasons why you think you can make a difference, is the starting point in my mind.
Radha, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, just taking off on Lloyd's point, everything starts from balance sheet and ends with balance sheet, right? And you don't see organizations reporting their brand value. I think Infosys attempted it many years ago when they used to, for some years, carry the brand value. And then I think it's gone now. Do you think that will help? Because a lot of times, as you start measuring your brand and as you start measuring your reputation in some way, people tend to become a little more negative and not just look at the risk aspect of it, but also enhancing the brand value aspect of it.
Rather, I think the process has begun. It's not happening to a large group of companies, but like in everything, the startup ecosystem stirs the pot, right? So they use directors, like Siraj pointed out, to embellish their investor value, right? A company, before going for an IPO, normally scurries around to get former Chief Justice of India and basically name the big guy. Right? Now they're getting a little bit more savvy. Let's get younger, notable media personalities, high credibility people, because that rub-off halo effect happens on the brand. So they're recognizing that. I think older companies are now sensing that that's an area that they have long ignored. Right? As everyone said, and we use parliamentary language, it was largely a cover your ass. Right? Do what you can to protect compliance, regulatory, tax, audit, law. Now I think it's also embellish your business, grow your market cap. I think we're getting there, but completely valid.
Hi, thanks so much. I've been listening in quietly to these conversations and very valuable inputs. I had a couple of observations and comments. Yeah. I'm Ophira from Mondelez, and I have a few comments as well as one clarification that sort of came through. I think what I have observed in my many years of being in this business, now close to 30, I think what we have done effectively is move from being a support function to a partner function, which is in itself is a very, very big move. Lloyd, you talked about the role that we were playing. So we have moved from being protect and risk management more to the promote part. Now, when you come to the promote part, it comes to the point of adding value to the business. And you can only add value to the business when you're part of, we're talking about boards here, but how many of our CCOs are part of the management teams themselves, the people who are taking business decisions? That's where the value gets added. And I think, Ritu, you mentioned about reputation and links to CCOs. In my head, reputation is not just for something for corporate affairs or corporate communications. Reputation is everybody's business in the organization. And the entire leadership team is responsible for reputation, right? What we do is we galvanize it, we organize it, we make sure the right outlets, we promote the right messages, that kind of stuff. But I would never want to take full responsibility of the reputation of my company. I'm an anchor for it, I drive it, but every single person in my organization, even a new management trainee posts something negative, it's impacting my reputation, or says that, I'm not having such a great time in my management program, it's impacting my reputation. I think it comes down to the last person. So reputation is everyone's business. And lastly, I know everybody's been talking in veiled manners about, influencers taking the benefit of reduced sugar. The fact is that if, people who are in the know, and I'm sorry, I'm clarifying on behalf of my company that makes Bonvita, right? I have to do this, is the fact that any food scientist or any person with some kind of experience in food will know that you cannot change a formulation in 6 months. It takes 2.5 to 3 years to change formulations. So I just wanted to clarify for Lloyd and for you, since you made that comment. Yeah.
Could we have Rachna ask questions?
But just a quick response. I think completely valid.
Yes.
Your point is, and I know the history of me. Just 2 points in the context of Mondelez. I think one is a lot of Mondelez's great success and brand value is communications led, right? The great history of brand Cadbury's, that everyone has a favorite Cadbury commercial of yours, right? So that's one part. specifically on the point you mentioned, I know that, and I get it from Deepak directly, is the fact is that what companies do and these processes are a small microcosm. Right? Before this, about 20 people in the room knew that brands take 6 months to change formulation. Now another 500 people know. 1.4 billion people have no clue. And therefore, assuming that scenario, a communication that says we acknowledge feedback and we learn from it and move is a very positive step. It has one more. So I'm saying very often it's defensive. I learned this the hard way when the pesticide controversy happened, and I'd say it because now it's history. Is that a lot of the beverage guys went and said, let's look up Sunita Narayan's past, and CSC's funding is screwed up, and there's lots of stuff. But is that the battle we're fighting? Can Pepsi and Coke ever win a battle with a lone warrior like Sunita Narayan and CSC? Never. It took us a long while. Shubham was on the other side in the media then. It was a tough learning, right? Because companies always believe that, we are blue-blooded. We've been in the business for 100 years and we won't harm a fly, but does the average man look at the street and see Pepsi and Coke pitted on one side and Sunita Narayan and see who's winning? You'll never win, right? The sooner you acknowledge and move forward, you move.
And you're absolutely right, Lloyd. I'm not arguing for a moment about that. But what I'm trying to say is, as you look at reputation, there is things like brand reputation and then there is corporate reputation, right? So while brand reputation is largely promoted by the marketing teams, and that comes back to some of the conversations we had, corporate reputation and trust is largely built by people in this room with the support of the rest of the organization. So that's where the
Thank you so much.
You're very nervous. You wanted to move fast very quickly.
There are a lot of hands up here, so I have good conversation. Manage.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very, very interesting conversation. I don't have a question, but I do have one or two comments that I can share with the team. One of my best moments was when one of the CEOs, and this depends a lot on the CEOs as well, they got me to be introduced to the board. And the first thing I asked, why do you want me to be going to the, discussion with the board? They say, because you being on the communications lead gives a lot of confidence to the board. The second is how do we, the expectation from the CEO was how do we engage with the board a little more, and those values, right, in terms of creating a campaign for the board members to understand our business, to take them to different places, to see what we do, that I think rests with the communicators. Because that creates a lot, and in our strategy for communications, we never think about communication or creating trust with the board. That's something which really adds on. And lastly, which is very important, recently discussing, and Siraj knows, in fact, communications, and as a communications lead, I've been a part of the discussion with the board selection. That I think is something that I feel very, very proud of. And this is not only about me. Some of the entities in Bayer are listed and some of them are not. My business partners or business leads, part of my communicators, they always sit through the annual, the board meetings or through the quarterly meetings. And not everywhere it is just the CSR or sustainability teams, it is also communicators. But we ourselves need to push ourselves in. We need in our strategy to have some pointers, to have some sort of a plan to how to build trust for our board members. We never do that as a part of our strategy. Some adding.
Thank you so much, Rachna. Just for clarification, we've had 3 questions from this side. We're going to move this side and get 3 questions from here. Sujit.
All right. I fully agree with what Lloyd sir spoke about in terms of creating that pull on the realms of reputation, and then creating that reputation, unit like a stakeholder engagement body, like a reputation thing. I work with almost 5 boards in terms of within Godrej for different companies. I find that the affinity towards reputation is huge. So I'm sure every board member, every family member, or promoter member, they have sleepless nights because of the reputation. So it's not that reputation is not understood by them. The point I'm trying to make is, we as communicators, as CCOs and corporate communications, we've done PR for HR, we've done PR for marketing, we've done PR for finance, we've done PR for every goddamn peon in the organization. Have we done PR for ourselves? That is where the whole issue starts. It's not that the boards, I'm part of the ExCom, the kind of conversations we have around reputation are insane. we are in Godrej Properties. You know the kind of stuff happening in. We can't not do those conversations. We are in an FMCG business. We are in an agri business. We are in a financial services business. The kind of talks which happen around reputation are huge, but they are presented to the board by your superiors. That's fine. The only limited point I'm trying to make is, as a community, if we do more PR for our own stuff and kind of make that statement that this is a function which actually drives this, which is not been seen in a serious manner. I think to Lloyd's point, and having those committees in the board, it'll work wonders. A suggestion is that nowadays we hear a lot about independent directors and this whole dearth of independent directors in organizations. Is there a way, I'm asking it to the panelists, is there a way that as an independent directors community, reputation management is made as a mandatory thing, and the independent directors are also slotted for from the community of communications as a, pardon me? From this room, yeah, kind of. You know, I mean, everyone, I'm not saying we just because we're CCO, we get a right to sit there, but of course building our competencies towards understanding better business in terms of understanding the numbers, the ratios and everything, legal aspects. If communications professionals do it, won't they be the better bet for being those independent directors who are the watchdogs? Because that's where the reputation gets discussed and, you know.
Yep, go ahead.
Valid point, Sujit.
Sujit, you're absolutely right. In fact, do all of you understand Hindi here? Okay, and so I'm going to basically share a Hindi sort of doha kind of a thing, and an Urdu couplet, which basically what I would see as a solution to addressing some of the problems. One thing which I often use, the word that I used to often use in my team and in life is that who would miss you if you're gone, right? Which is essentially saying that, and that was the question I started off with, because that's a question that I always ask myself about everything that I do, and when I lead people, that are you relevant to people? So the establishing that relevance of your role, unfortunately people don't acknowledge your relevance till they are in trouble, right? So there is a Hindi couplet that I often have learnt and used, bhay bin hoy na preet, which means that till there is fear, the crisis, there is no love, right? So look for those opportunities to find that love. The second, and which is what I said in terms of building influence and building your stature, is that khud hi ko kar buland itna ki har takdeer se pehle khuda bande se पूछे बता तेरी रजा क्या है. So the point is that you will have to, you're still being used as a tool. You're the bullet. You're not yet being made the gun, and so that empowerment has to come by. So the best guy, actually, from a business perspective, would be a very business savvy corporate communication guy. So if you are the savvy corporate communication guy, there will have to be an effort to make yourself the business savvy guy. And I used to love the role where I'm the chairman. I have no business responsibility and I still get to talk, right? It's just that I understand the business. So now when I sit on the boards and people ask me, what do you do? I said, I've just shifted my role from the side of the table where I had to answer questions to where I can ask questions. So the only skill investment I do now is to build myself to ask more intelligent questions. So it is about somewhere, I think, the role that you all can build yourself up to vis-a-vis your own organization, to have the ability to ask the intelligent questions which you can then be answering for the organization to the external world.
Thank you. Lloyd, do you have anything else to add, or we can move? One at the back.
Sorry. Thank you. Lots to say, and thank you very much.
State your name.
Sorry, Amit Narayan. I work at Control Risks. It's a risk consulting company. Lots of fantastic discussions. I'll just add on, sir, actually follow on from what you're saying, because as you know, for every risk and audit committee meeting every quarter, there is a risk register that gets published by the company. I made a transition from being a communicator to being in risk consulting 6 years ago, and I realized the massive power behind that risk register. And the number of questions that you spoke about, the value and the power of the questions that the risk register offers to you to go and speak to the CISO, the CHRO, the CFO and all the rest, that then becomes a trapdoor, a wedge that allows the communications person to come in. I realize that risk is the flip side of reputation, but it's not as easy as flipping the coin, because you get slotted into swimming lanes, and I realized how difficult and different the conversations that a risk person gets involved in as compared to a reputation person. And I think it's appalling. I genuinely think companies are missing a trick by not getting the good news guys in first and surviving with the bad news guys. But bad news, आपने जो बोला बिल्कुल ठीक बोला, is what leads to affection and love and desire. Quite a few other comments, but I'll just...
Thank you, Amit. We're going to listen more from you tomorrow. Sunita had a question. Could we come to her first, if you don't mind? Because we'll cover this side, then we'll come to that side.
On the gender diversity, right now there's too many female questions, but...
I'll get to that.
Yeah. I just wanted to add, almost 10 months back, I did a program in the Institute of Directors, and then we went through all the committees and all those, we had many series of sessions by professionals and experts and board of directors from other companies as well. So in the end, we had to submit a thesis, and everybody were going in for these. As they're doing the CSR part, they were doing some audit, some financial thing, and I was thinking to myself, what should I write on? Because I'm not, while you have a fair understanding of business, I want to do something which is I'm passionate about, is about brands. So I wrote a thesis on brands, the missing conversation in Indian boardrooms. That was my paper. And in that, I did complete analysis. When it took me almost like 10 days to do all the analysis. Went on to Statista and all these sites, and went on, what is brand equity, triple bottom line reporting, and all of that, and why the brand, equity is so important, and instances and case studies of how brands with higher brand equity command a greater price, whether it's for its product or service or in terms of what is done. And the recommendation I made is, I had to send it to the institute. Recommendation I made is, just like they have an audit committee, they should have a brand audit committee, because the reputation of the organization is far more precious than anything else, and it cannot be relegated just to a CMO or anybody else, and that the board has a very big role in steering this conversation, and communications and brand professionals should be a critical part of this audit committee and this brand audit committee, and this should be recommended. In fact, they've asked me to publish it as a white paper. I'm still checking for, like all the copyright and all those things. I still haven't done it. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah.
That's a starting point.
Do you have any of the panelists to respond? Do you want them to respond to?
I was just thinking, is that something that if such things can be come from you, recommendations when you're on various boards, that brand audit committees and people, communications professionals like us, should be steer this brand audit committee. That will be a great way, at least putting one step forward for our fraternity at large.
My only suggestion to you or question to you is that you've done such a wonderful report, and this is exactly how change happens. It's an advocacy format. And you all have access to such a large number of journalists and PR fraternity. Why not socialize it? Because change happens through advocacy.
Actually, I haven't had like I said, I just wanted to vet the document. You have to do the appendices and, all the APL thing. I just wanted to make sure I do the right attribution. I haven't done it. And hopefully I'll take the support from everybody to publish it so that the entire fraternity is benefited. And people like all of you, big representative, big voices on the board will make this a case for all of us to also be a part of such committees and steer them.
Sure. I'm Taranveer Sahani from VSnapU. We are India's biggest content generation company. So, there was one part which was touched by all three of you, ma'am started by saying that, listed companies are a little boring, where only communication which you get from them is the quarterly report. And then sir was insisting on the fact that instead of relying on Deepika Padukone, I would rely on my neighbor or a small influencer who actually speaks the truth. And you were also giving examples of perfect communication which are done by brands like Zomato, which happen to be very younger brands. And Zomato happens to be one of my clients, much like other younger companies like Make My Trip or Oyo. So when you say that the leadership which is standing, which is sitting above, does not know how to communicate to the consumers, do you think we should, as consumers, only wait for the time when the leadership changes and younger people come? Or do you think there is a decision maker who's sitting quietly in the boardroom, whose responsibility it is to actually tell the leaders that this is what the consumer needs to hear, this is the communication which is missing?
So I'm part of one board. I'm part of one board, and I'm not. You guys have to make the interpretation of which board.
You can take this.
Yeah, you will make the. I can't publicly say it. Name the board, but has a personality who is like a poster child of the new age India, and is probably one of the most media shy person I've ever seen. Now, the person has his own point of view, or has his. When I say media shy, not like he doesn't like communicating outwardly or public speaking or whatever. It's just that these such individuals are gifted in some ways and in many ways. This gentleman has changed the way we view India's view to the outside world in a big way. He's responsible for that change. However, he doesn't like doing that job. But it's not going to be. It's a gentle sunrise rather than switching on a bulb, because I think the constant feedback, like I have been after him, that I do understand his concern and apprehension, but the world is changing. And consumers, stakeholders, shareholders somehow trust and appreciate and create value for organization where the person at the helm is honest and directly communicating through good times and bad times. A person who does not hesitate, like I have seen leaders who, when there is a bad time, then once the other persons, the junior people, go fight the battle. I've seen it. It's a shame, but I think you'll never be part of a company where everything is going right all the time. There will be problems, there will be misses, unintended slippages. But the fact that you are out there as the leader of the company, and I think when you spoke about reputation, finally all of this accountability rests, I believe, with the CEO. The buck stops always with the CEO of a company. And from that perspective, if the CEO goes and owns up and says, we made a mistake, we goofed up, and this is how we're going to correct the mistake, I think you get a much longer pass than people who just saying, okay, now I have my army who's going to fight the battle for me while I sit tight. So that world has changed. But with such situations, there will be people, because I have seen media speaking or outward speaking is not a talent some of these gifted CEOs have. But that's why everyone in this room is very important. That you have to create an ecosystem which makes them feel more comfortable day by day, and then they graduate to that position where they can be the face of the brand. So it's a process, I feel.
Just a small little value add there. I think also in the startup ecosystem, and I think it was touched upon earlier, there's too much danger of the CEO being the brand, right? The Kamath brothers for Zerodha and so on and so forth. I think one of the things that, and I advise one of these so-called unicorn IPOs, is to watch out for that, because that tends to be a hard double-edged sword, right? Then people suddenly says, oh, he bought a Maserati or whatever he bought, right? And those are negative things. So I think the idea is to also, as communication professionals, warn all your organizations about building a leadership pipeline. One aspect is thought leadership, having 5-6 CXOs out there, posting regular things in social media, but also have a bit of a communications pipeline. So not just one authorized spokesperson and one CEO, but at least 6 or 7 who are constantly articulating the company's value proposition, and some specialized by sectors. There are certain communities that the government will buy, right? When your CTO talks about, or the head of manufacturing talks about it, he's likely to find his way into a government like a CII, FICCI, or SEMI, advocacy body, because the government wants to hear about having more labor, who manufacturing. So create those little, kind of sectoral specialists. But I think outlining some of that could be the role of the comms team. So let's think these are the areas that we don't do very well. We're fabulous when it comes to a consumer brand. We're fabulous when it comes to the, let's say, the investor community. But go to a college campus and people think we are crap, right? Somebody's got to show that mirror and call it out. And I think comms is the best suited to do that kind of thing.
Thank you, Lloyd. In fact, many a time we have that proposition and we hear that they don't want to promote individuals at functional level because they tend to kind of help them transition into new companies. So that becomes a attrition threat to companies. So that kind of comes as a hurdle at times. So last question to the lady at the back and maybe to you. Last two questions, yes. One after another.
Yes, Kritika from TCS. I wanted to touch upon a point that Ritu had made on preventative reputation management or crisis management. So, for instance, a problem that I face very regularly is TCS has 600,000 people around 55 countries. Yes, tracking is one part of it. So, obviously Glassdoor, Quora, the works. I mean, there is a very regular tracking system in place. But beyond the point, the problem that we keep facing is, there's always a 21-year-old kid who's joined and who just goes and shoots his mouth off on, I'm giving an example. But there is nothing to stop that one person. Obviously, there's social media policies and everything. But beyond a point, with the scale of people that we have, the problem that we face very regularly is that last mile prevention. So are there sort of tools or best cases that you've seen where this can be made to measure in a way where you are able to prevent it on a regular basis? Because beyond tracking and beyond regular monitoring, there aren't that many tools to be able to do that. So, in your experience or in terms of even putting compliances in place, what are kind of the best case scenarios that you've seen in the industry? Yeah.
Are you trying to figure out early on who are the ones who are likely to now go and express their dissatisfaction?
No, rather the other way that, how do you sort of prevent this aspect of...
Look, this is of course going beyond your corporate communication capacity to also employee engagement. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And especially organization as large and who's always in the media lens. Let me share one experience. Journalists like day in and day out would call me, even now they call me, the first question they ask, Ritu, andar ka khabar batao. Tell me who's going to let go of people. Tell me who's firing people. Tell me So essentially, and I know some of you are ex-journalists, the journalist community knows that bad news make more news, and hence they're constantly scouting for this. Why? Because what can they do? That's how they survive, right? That those news get picked up more, that more sansani, and their editors are pressurizing them that that's exactly what they need to be talking about. So I honestly feel that beyond a point, we didn't speak about layoff and how you deal with layoff. I'm candidly sharing with you this. When there's news of TCS laying off, I spend nights answering for TCS. Then why TCS laid off? What's the reason?
We don't lay off, not just everybody. We don't lay off. It's the
So what I feel is that beyond a point, the layoff news now are passé. It's just... I feel sometimes it's good to go on the offensive and declare and be upfront rather than waiting for someone to sniff and report the news. If any such thing, especially around talent, my suggestion is that Don't wait for some investigative journalist to come and report the story. Be the first one to report it. You have blunt the impact when you do it yourself and you give rationale for it. Of course, keep the board informed, because boards are very sensitive now on any news of layoff or anything to do with talent, because it makes very bad news. Government also wakes up in some such situations. So I feel, rather than playing defensive on any such issues, because these are business exigency choices people make, just go on the, I'm not saying offensive, but be the first one to talk about it. And in terms of sensing dissatisfaction, we live in the world where anyone can write anything at any point in time. So I guess it's here employee engagement plays such a critical role. There are artificial intelligence tools which are now capable of sensing dissatisfaction in employees. So please work closely with your employee engagement team as far as possible to kind of sense what's going on and what catastrophic sudden news will come up. But you live and learn. These are things that you have to be used to now, because there's social media everywhere.
Thank you, Rituparna, for sharing the strategy. Question.
Hi, I'm Shivani from Lowe's. I think one observation or comment and a last question to the panel. Money talks, right? And we're talking about elevating the role of the communications chief CCO and the communications function. I think at first, maybe, as boards, how are you looking at the pay parity within the organization, right? Recently, there was a report that a data scientist with 8 to 10 years of experience is being offered 1.5 CR upwards. If reputation is a key risk factor that the board is tracking, how is there pay parity for the function that is managing that reputation risk? So I think that is something for us to consider. Often communications is put in a support function, a pay grade. There's a business function pay grade, which is separate. So if the pay grade is going to be different, you're going to get that quality of talent on board. And that's the quality of talent that's going to manage your brand and reputation in the event of a crisis, right? So I think that's something for us to look at as well. And so my last question is, I think Siraj, you mentioned, right, in your questions, where does communications sit? So where do you think communications needs to sit, right? And I'd love to hear from you, from your perspective. Should it be in the marketing organization, strategy organization, HR, finance, or should it be reporting to the CEO?
Okay, so one straight answer is, I would see it as report to the CEO.
Yeah, same. I think communication should report to the CEO. Relevance of CCOs, and he of course touched upon it. I don't know whether you're aware, but team leads in the last 23 years have not spent a single money on any form of sponsorship or advertisement. It's a brand which is built completely on communication and public relations. So I can tell you that at least I, for one, who drove that, while wearing my CEO hat, I personally took charge of this particular role because I saw that much value. And if it's now valued $1 billion company, and if shareholder, and by the way, our stock is trading at a much higher PE multiple than our peer, who has supposedly higher profitability than us. It's because of the trust premium and the governance premium that we enjoy. And honestly, that we've been able to do by building a brand which is built on effective corporate communications.
Great.
Thank you, Rituparna. Thank you, panelists, for your time. I understand that it's about time. And a lot of interesting conversations. Some of the things that I take away and kind of recap for everyone, that of course there was an echo about elevating the role of communications, and there was a good point that one of the audience made about that how do we make difference in management so that it kind of gets reflected. I think that's was something that Sujit also talked about, and I think we in the course of the conversation had a lot of good insights from the panelists as to how to make the function stronger, and some of the points that you make about academically how we are doing things as to be more evidence-based in our ability to increase the role of communication. I think advocating for that is very important. So I think a lot of interesting conversation. Some of the questions may have still been left unanswered. Maybe I request anybody who has questions to please meet the panelists during the coffee break or later in the evening. Thank you so much for your time, and really appreciate you taking all the questions.
Thank you, Arpit. Thank you, Arpit.
I request the panelists to